Hi, folks. Today I'd like to go through an article that was published in the Seattle Weekly of April 24th called American Parasite. Mitt Romney's years at Bain represents everything you hate about capitalism by Peter Kotz. Here's a beautiful picture of the publication. Whoop. Now, I'll admit that Seattle is one of the most liberal places in America, but we've got a lot of facts and figures and dates in this article, kind of stuff that you're probably never going to hear from the Republicans, and they're probably not going to hear from the Democrats either, because they're always so nice and so statesmanlike, and they probably got dirty laundry of their own that they don't want to open that can of worms. But today we are channeling the spirit of Rush Limbaugh. We are reading our paper, rattling our newspaper in indignation at the hypocrisy of the right. So here we go. So maybe you're asking yourself, how did that Mitt Romney get to be so darn rich anyway? Well, according to this article, his formula was simple. Bain would purchase a firm with little money down and begin extracting huge management fees and paying Romney and his investors enormous dividends. The result was that previously profitable companies were now burdened with debt. Bain would slash costs, jettison workers, reposition product lines, and merge its new companies with other firms. With luck, they'd be able to dump the firm in a few years for millions more than they paid for it. But the beauty of Romney's thesis was that it really didn't matter if the company succeeded, since he was yanking out cash early and often. He would profit, even if its target, as an example, Bain bought a steel mill in Kansas City, Missouri called Armco Steel. This firm had been operating for over 100 years and was setting a lot of production records, was a profitable company at the time of its purchase. Bain combined Armco with mills in Georgetown and foundries in Tempe, Arizona and Duluth, Minnesota to form a company called GS Industries. Romney purchased Armco with just $8 million down, borrowing the rest of the $75 million price tag. Then he issued bonds, basically IOUs, to borrow even more to pay himself and his investors $36 million. Within a year, he'd already made 4 times his initial investment, while barely lifting a finger. But he'd also run up a staggering $378 million in debt on the GS Industries tab. Once GS Industries got going, staff was cut, maintenance was neglected, long-time managers who understood the steel industry were replaced by new people who had no idea what they were doing. Basically, Bain managed the company not in a way to facilitate production, but basically just trying to fluff up their short-term bottom line. Bain didn't invest in maintenance or immediate customer needs. All that came second to meeting monthly financial goals. It would take a few more years of bleeding, but GSI eventually fell to bankruptcy. The Kansas City mill closed for good. 750 people lost their jobs. Worse, Romney had shorted their pension fund by $44 million, which the federal government, i.e. the American taxpayer, was then put on the hook for. The battered Georgetown plant and the foundries in Arizona and Minnesota ultimately were brought out of bankruptcy by a new company. Their workforces were halved. Still, Romney walked away unbruised. All that debt was technically GS Industries debt, not Bain's debt. Because he'd repaid himself and his investors just months before the purchase, Romney pocketed millions for running the company into the ground. This is the real beauty of Romney's racket. Even if he killed a company, and he tended to kill them fairly often, he still made out, leaving others to take the hit. In 1994, Bain purchased Dade International, an Illinois medical equipment company. He merged it with two similar firms, a move that tripled sales. Once again, he couldn't help but raid the vault, peeling away $100 million for himself and investors. At the same time, Dade was laying off 1,700 American workers. Bain was again extracting profits with borrowed money. It had pushed Dade's debt to a bracing $2 billion. To help pay for the deal, the company laid off another 367 workers. But the debt proved too much for Dade's shoulders to carry. 3 years later, the company was bankrupt. Many people looking at Romney's overall record say that this kind of cherry-picking, disaster cherry-picking is unfair, that all in all he did more good than bad. Well, in January, the Wall Street Journal did its best to piece together Romney's track record, reviewing 77 investments made under his direction. It turned out that nearly 1 in 3 of the companies experienced severe financial trouble. 1 in 5 wound up in bankruptcy. The more telling figure of Romney's 10 biggest moneymakers, he ultimately destroyed 4 of them, leaving bankruptcy judges to clean up the mess. The standard economic justification for companies like Bain Capital are that they buy failing companies and then reorganize them and make them profitable companies. But the actual truth of the matter is quite different. Basically, private equity companies like Bain rarely buy anything but profitable firms for one very compelling reason. The patient must be healthy enough to be force-fed all that debt. So, if it's something of a misnomer for Republicans' opponents to slur him, Romney, as a vulture capitalist. Romney is not a vulture capitalist, as Rick Perry says, since vultures eat dead carcasses. Romney is more of a parasitic capitalist, since he destroys profitable businesses. Romney and the Republicans in general are always screaming about government handouts to people, and the truth is that many of these people have made their fortune or have been helped along in their fortune making by government handouts, government subsidies of one sort or another. In 1988, Romney bought the South Carolina photo album maker Holson Burns in exchange for the firm's promise to build a new factory. The people of Gaffney, South Carolina, gave Bain $5 million in bonds and $200,000 in utility upgrades. The plant closed just 4 years later. The 100 jobs that were created were later shipped to Mexico. At GS Industries, he dumped $44 million in pension shortfalls on the federal government. And when he bought mattress maker Sealy in 1997, he took $600,000 in welfare to move the firm from Ohio to North Carolina. Even a company Romney cites as one of his greatest achievements, Steel Dynamics, where he was a minority investor, was practically launched by corporate welfare. Indiana taxpayers gave the firm $77 million to open a plant. Residents of DeKalb County actually had their income taxes raised solely to help Romney and his friends. Ted DeHaven called it theft and redistribution. And Ted DeHaven is no yammering Trotskyite. He is former budget advisor to Republican U.S. Senator Jeff Sessions and Tom Coburn. He now works for the Cato Institute, a conservative think tank. He says the Fed takes hundreds of billions a year from everyday taxpayers and sends it straight to companies like Romney's. The rich like to go on and on about how they made all their money through hard work. It's really about the only justification they have for being rich. But believe me, for every Steve Jobs out there who had a brilliant idea and worked hard to bring it into reality, there are 10 or 20 other guys who are just clever enough to figure out a loophole in the law or a little trick that will allow them to game the system and make huge profits, essentially without contributing anything to the overall good of society. And I'm sorry to say, Mitt Romney is no Steve Jobs. He's one of those other guys. The great irony is that his entire management experience at Bain Capital is buying companies and loading them up with debt, and then looting the balance sheet. It's the very model that drove the American economy off the cliff, then left other people to manage the wreckage. I used to own a wholesale bagel bakery, and I remember the day I went into the bank and signed my name and received a check for $150,000. This is the good old days when you didn't need a lot of documentation. I feel, as I walked out of the bank, I thought to myself, maybe I should just take this check and go down to the airport and head for Brazil. Well, that's kind of the Romney method, I suppose. Unfortunately, I was a chump. I cashed a check and actually used the money to try to build my business. But I guess that's why I live here in a small house in suburbia, and Mitt Romney's running for president. I didn't have enough imagination. Well, I don't know about you. I have to say, I'm inclined to believe all this stuff. And I don't know about you, but I don't want this guy running the country. He's just a shark. He's going to rape this country until it bleeds. And then he's going to fly off to his magic island someplace, never to be seen again. I hope you can look into some of this stuff on your own. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.